As hard as it is to build an open source business, I think it ends up being a forcing function for really deeply understanding value alignment and making sure that you actually are providing value to users. Like we've added a new definition to 10x engineer. Like historically, 10x engineers were like these staff principal type people that shaped the architecture of business. But it's like we now have the second definition, which is like I literally have 10x output of a typical software engineer.
Hi, this is Brian Douglas, and you're listening to Open Source Ready, a bi-weekly series where we discuss the evolution of open source software and its impact on the tech landscape. Along with my co-host John McBride, we'll explore topics like open source AI, the business, and the life and sustainability of open source. Open Source Ready is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor of developer-first startups. For more information, visit heavybit.com. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us at x.com/opensourceready. Welcome to another installment of Open Source Ready. On the line is John McBride, my co-host. John, how you doing?
Hey, Brian, I'm doing good. Exciting things are happening. How are you?
I'm doing well. I feel refreshed. I just got off a Southwest flight and was delayed for 6 hours with 3 kids. So I would not wish that on anybody. But we're all alive and well, and we're all back to work and school, and we're here to run the next mile of this 2026. So here we are.
Yeah.
We've got actually quite a bit of guests here from the dltHub team. So I want to welcome all of you. But I'll shout out to Matt first. Why don't you introduce yourself, dltHub, and we can go around the horn to introduce each one of us.
Hi, Brian. I'm John. I'm Matthaus. I'm the CEO, co-founder of dltHub. We've been doing dltHub since 2020, I think.
Wow. And Thierry, you've joined the team, well, not shortly after, but you joined within the last couple of years, right?
Yeah. So my name's Thierry. I'm based on the East Coast of Montreal. I'm a senior AI engineer. Lead a lot of the new front line of data engineering and AI, working with LLMs and how it directly connects to Python code and connector as codes.
Cool. And Elvis, your newest team member.
I think I'm the newest. Yeah, but I'm working at DLT as a developer advocate. And so my job is to get DLT into the hands of as many people as possible, which is really exciting because I was a DLT user before joining. And so it's fun to evangelize a product that you use yourself.
Yeah, so let's just jump in. Like, what is DLT? Like, why do I care about it?
So DLT is a Python library. It's Apache 2 license. It's free. Before joining DLT, actually, I was a user of DLT, and it's the best tool in Python if you ask me to move data, whether it's from a REST API source, a file system, a database, and to move it to where you want to do more data operations. So your warehouse, your data lake, your lake house, or whatever is trendy next year.
What does DLT stand for? I'm familiar with DBT. What do all these acronyms stand for? As somebody who's maybe data science curious, what would you tell them?
So DBT stands for Data Build Tool. They're a transform layer tool. So they transform data that's already in your warehouse. And DLT is a data load tool. So it's loading the data where you want to do further transforms. If you search on the web, you'll probably hit distributed ledger technology also, but we're gaining SEO points as we grow.
Yeah, so is this something, I guess we should be very clear, is this something you guys developed at the dltHub company?
That's correct. So it's something we started developing in early 21. And then we opened up this to the community a little bit more than 2 years ago. So we were bootstrapping the first 1.5 years and then opened up to the community 2.5 years ago.
Okay. And so what's the adoption look like? Tell me what the star count is. I don't think I have the repo.
I don't think we actually focus too much on the stars, but we just crossed 4 million downloads a month.
Nice.
Where 16 months ago, we had around 1,000 organizations using DLT in production. Now we crossed 7,500 over Christmas. And around 14 months ago, we started to get indexed by the LMs. And most of our growth this year, since around May, our web traffic on our docs started to plateau. And all our adoption is growth is by LMs who are hitting our docs and our library.
Nice. Perfect. Yeah, because funny enough, I ended up using Claude to build out a pipeline for me. So I basically built like a mermaid chart to figure out what tools I should build a pipeline. most of the listeners know John and I from open source days. John was like, build all the infrastructure, joined me at the Linux Foundation to work on that, which we have a mutual connection. Matt at the Linux Foundation is building LFX Insights, and I believe also using dltHub. So I had the idea of like, why don't I build a pipeline from GitHub that's using Python and DuckDB? And it was honestly like and this is our connection to like, recently we did a workshop together at Small Data Conf where I kind of showed off a small little piece of how I built this pipeline from GitHub to build data insights and charts and graphs. And I will say it was like pretty like straightforward for me to get this off the ground and running. And John was saying he's data science curious. Like I am like not even close to like curious. I was just more of like to get the job done, do the thing, and like get out of my way. And I think that's what really helped me kind of grok on what this thing is. So like leveraging DLT, the open source project a ton, but also in explorations of like how to leverage the hub and make this more of like a repackageable experience. But John, I was covered all that context. I failed to actually mention that to you. Or no, I think I mentioned this to you before I jumped on the call a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, because I think there was the connect with DuckDB. And that's something I'm very curious with DLT. How is it integrating with a lot of these things like DuckDB or the various lake real estate places?
So John, I think without DuckDB, DLT would not exist.
Really?
We're literally 6 weeks into going full throttle, and we were one of the first 90 people at DuckCon number 2, and we saw the light.
Wow.
Because like essentially what we ran into and was like the initial idea for DLT, we got early access to GPT-3 in, I think, April or March 2020. And we were suddenly building data pipelines for the Python AI crowd. And what we ran into is the fights with the traditional SQL database, relational database data engineers who were gatekeeping anything the Python kids were doing. And it was like everywhere, already 5 years ago. And then the idea is, what if we do all these things in Python, easy to understand, which all these Python people can do, but where they don't need to learn data engineering. And DuckDB was a eureka, essentially, because DuckDB gives, on your local machine, people all the freedom to do what they want, right? They're not like gatekeeped in their tool choice like they are in the cloud tooling. And so if you look at our docs, everything is DuckDB first. And the code is such that whenever it runs locally, you can push it the same way to the cloud. It was like, is literally, you intuitively hit one of our earliest like big insights of how to make this more useful to people.
Brian's very good at doing that.
Yeah, literally yesterday I had a goal. We have this open source tool at Continue where we're running these like workflows or pipelines, if you will, for agents. And I just wanted to use a bunch of GitHub data to find out how many folks are using Continue in projects with more than 1,000 stars. Like I could search this at github.com/search, but I've got access to these pipelines. Let me build a pipeline to basically just answer that question. But like I was able to leverage the MCP to like get me started. And like I already got the framework of like what I need to accomplish. And again, I'm not a data science even curious. I just want you to do the thing and get out of the way. So plugging into Continue, like my agent, and have the MCP like scaffold this thing out, problem solved. So like all I'm doing is in DuckDB, querying the data every day, and then answering the question like how many folks have adopted Continue in the public, which is like, I think a lot of these like the worlds of like this data science is like, you just want to answer the question. But when I was at GitHub, specifically whenever I needed a data science problem, you got to open a ticket, you got to like scope out the problem. You have a couple weeks of meetings to like clarify the scope of the work and like basically have them kill everything you asked for. And then you get this like hodgepodge of stuff you didn't want, but like you got to like have something to move forward with. Like I feel empowered and emboldened to like go answer and solve my own problems at this point without the need of like waiting for either contractors or data teams to unblock me. So hats off to you guys for like one, getting the connection to DuckDB, because DuckDB in itself is an amazing tool to be able to query data in a way that's natural, but also not awful like SQL. But now you have this thing on top of it to help you get to production-ready data science.
Looking forward, also, like DuckDB is a key piece of everything that people are building regarding data engineering and AI, because having data that's local or in this DuckDB instance like really limits the blast radius of what an LLM can create as a problem in terms of security, but also messing with your data. So it allows you to copy stuff and operate at scale and efficiently.
Yeah, so we talked about DuckDB and also DLT, but can we distinguish dltHub now at this point? Because I'm intrigued that the sort of company angle and this side of this, but also like, what is the hub to you guys today, and what is it to your customers, users, etc.?
So I think the clarity between open source DLT and commercial dltHub is that DLT is an open source Python library and it handles the extract and load part, right? So extract and load data from messy sources into clean data sets. And this is like, as you said, it's interoperable, it's modular, and it's built from the ground up to work with LLMs. And the step with dltHub is we're extending it into transformations. So you manipulating the data into storage and runtime. And the vision for it is traditionally until recently, and it's a little bit like the experience of what you had with DLT, Brian, is if you wanted to do everything, right? Like essentially from the data engineering to the analysis, imagine you're in a larger organizations, then you need infra and security people. This was being too difficult. And our vision for dltHub is to make it so simple that a single person can do everything end to end, from your local dev environment up to the cloud. So this is what we're building.
Perfect. So like at this point, you're building it. Like what stage are you guys in? Like how do you, we talked about the adoption for DLT, but like I'm curious, like what are the use cases that folks are, one, going to DLT for or dltHub now? And like use the opportunity to like resonate to the audience of like, okay, I might be listening. I've never heard of DLT or dltHub. Like, what are use cases that folks are looking for? I kind of shared my GitHub example, but I'd be curious to hear of like what's working.
Yeah, I can give you a sense. Personally, I run a pipeline that ingests house market data while I'm looking at houses. I think it's very simple to get started, and it has a lot of configuration and knobs to tune performance. So like DLT is production ready. It's used in many enterprises in like their critical infrastructure. So if you're someone that ingests data from a REST API that's public on the web or that's internal, if you're doing a database replication or you need to move data from an operational system like your payment system to your data warehouse or maybe your CRM, those are a lot of cases that like DLT is used for and like finds success doing. But I think one thing that's special about DLT, it's because it's open source, because it's Apache 2 license, because anyone can audit the code. It's adopted in highly sensitive industries like healthcare, finance, because they want to be able to inspect all of this code and own the pipeline, own the connectors, and not have outside interference change their things or be sensitive to changes in like a vendor is offering. So that's definitely something that we've seen. But then typically they come to us and they ask for more, and that's where we find inspiration for our paid product, our dltHub platform.
Yeah, one other use case as well that I was experiencing at my former company is me and also our forward deployed engineers were responsible for taking customers from 0 to 1. And so we essentially get like a bunch of these like schemas because they can't actually give us their actual data. And we'd have to, for example, do a bunch of like data generation. And in one of these pipelines, you might be moving like hundreds of gigabytes from like your local machine or some cluster into a data warehouse. And so the nice thing for us is that with DLT, we were able to like switch out the actual end destination with this like one line of code. And so this made it so that we could actually scale up these like onboarding pipelines for customers across different tech stacks, depending on what that customer wanted. And a second thing that was super helpful is that there was a lot of ergonomics around schema evolution. And so if we did give a customer back a data set and say, does this look like your actual data? And they give us a modification to like a column or some schema, it'd be really easy for us to either like regenerate it completely, right? And then not pay like some cloud platform a bunch of money to move, again, hundreds of gigabytes of data, right? Or even just like change the schema in a way that there was like zero copy in whatever like file system we moved it to.
And Brian, I'll give you like the founder product market fit answer and not the developer answer. So what's special is now that the number of Python developers is rising super quickly. And there's managers of these Python developers now. And these Python developers know if they get choice of this graphic user interface, old connector tooling, SaaS tooling, it's not something they really appreciate from the developer's perspective. It's not something they want. They want to use Cursor or Claude or Continue, and you can't make that work with old connected and GUI in SaaS world. At the same time, as Thierry suggested, we have a lot of technical leaders, and they need to make sure things are sensitively cared, that data quality is catered to, that whatever auditing happens in the correct way, so they want control, so therefore they want code. So this is like the tension where we operate. And we, surprisingly to a lot of people, we rarely compete with like graphical user interface tool. We literally mostly compete with internal Python scripts. So that's piece number one. And the second thing is what Thierry described is around, like the sensitive industries, finance, health. What Elvis described is around people needing a lot of customization and developer control. Like what a lot of our database partners like Snowflake are surprised about is how big our customers are. And, startups usually don't have large corporations in finance and health and manufacturing run on the open source tooling very quickly. And, we have all these badges from Snowflake in all these industries. And they're surprised that we as their partner are able to serve customers like this.
And is this would you tack that on to like the fact that you're open source with DLT first, making it approachable, or is this like more the connection that with your data partnership? You don't have to share your secret sauce, but like I'm curious, like how are you capturing this market that folks are unaware of? At least Snowflake is, that you can do this.
So the first 1.5 years we were actually closed, and what's interesting about this is we're interoperable and modular, but not only to the Python world, to pandas and notebooks, but also to the traditional modern data stack. Before we launched, we spent 4 months on optimizing our helper for Airflow. This is a tool the Python script crowd doesn't even aware of, but like once you move to the enterprise, this is what often is there. Or our DPT helpers. Like we knew that when we're Showtime, we need to be interoperable with people's tool stacks, and we are. And so we spent a lot of time to make it happen. The second thing is and this is the power of the community. Whenever somebody does something interesting in DuckDB, often they start talking about it, and chances are they talk about us. And so it gives us like a feedback loop and from our user base and from our community, and get to hear how we're not only work as DLT by itself, but as part of people's tooling. And whenever something's interesting happened, I know a couple weeks ago, boring semantic layer in our world, for example, then somebody will start doing demos around it and then start talking to us and giving people. It's a beautiful feedback loop, and it's something we've done on purpose. It made us sometimes in our development architecture slower because we feel we're stewards to a lot of these different tools. But I think it's worth a gain. And you ask me maybe also implicitly, when did we figure that out? Like I think in the first couple of weeks, I talked to Sebastian Ramirez from Fast API. And he told me, like Matthaus, half of a company is your docs. If you want start early, just be helpful to other people. Don't spam anything with your tools or whatever agenda you may have. Just try to be generally useful. And one of my co-founders, Adrian, for the first year, he just lived in comments on LinkedIn, on Reddit, on Stack Overflow, where he was just genuinely helpful. And that's like the advice I keep on giving to other open source founders. Like just try to be genuinely good person in your domain, and good things happen.
Yeah, it's really good advice. I always feel a little sad, probably being chronically online at this point, but it seems like some of the advice is the opposite in the like AI or startup ecosystem. Like if you can be really kind of edgy, then maybe being edgy is an edge. But I do like that. I think that especially in the open source ecosystem, communities respond really well, at least in my experience, from really kind and generous people in open source, right?
Yeah, one of the biggest perk of my job, I would say, is being able to contribute to other projects.
Yeah.
Like I spend time giving back, like with feedback, with issues, with PRs, for tools that I like to use, but also tools that we want to integrate with. So like I spend time chatting with the folks at Continue, contributed features to Marimo, which is a notebook environment. And like we really like Ibis, SQL Glut, and I think it's mutually beneficial to have these tools work nicely together, because users will have a better experience. And at the software layer, in the end, it's really like the best user experience that will win and gain the bigger traction in the end.
And I think, John, the LLM stuff actually is beneficial for open source. These things go so fast. We cannot handle even like we can only, you need to be super focused, right? And you need to rely on other people left and right to develop good software and listen to users, because the speed of code development has dramatically increased in the last couple of months.
Yeah, the one note you mentioned, Matt, about this, like making it work with other tools and making it basically approachable. John, we were having a conversation about this earlier this week. This is about the approach of adoption open source and like getting in the enterprise. And that's one thing that attracted me to Continue, is that the open source angle of like enterprises happen to deploy this at scale because they saw an opportunity to basically ship an AI coding agent that was going to work with their tools behind their firewall. And it's pretty fascinating on how quick folks can get adoption. The whole sales cycle and everything like that all becomes interesting. But like, I think when people love what you're doing, they're willing to work with you to figure out, okay, well, if we're willing to pay for this part of the control plane or this part of the data. I guess what I'm seeing at the Continue site, you get really great R&D and feedback from not just open source, but also some of the largest players at the stage.
100%.
Yeah, I think also the enterprises that really get open source, you can tell because they see that it's mutually beneficial. They get to shape a product that they like. And I think it's well worth the investment.
Yeah, Elvis, you got a response?
Yeah, I also would add that as hard as it is to build an open source business, I think it ends up being a forcing function for really deeply understanding value alignment and making sure that you actually are providing value to users. And so I actually think it prevents people from having an anti-pattern of like having business models that are based on like, vendor lock-in or making it difficult for people to not use your platform versus like making developers love it. And so that's another reason that I really like open source dev tools. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had like a final question, just more about the other tools in the space. I think I sort of got this question from reading your docs and your landing page, but just curious about the connectors in the space. Like you mentioned the LT and the ELT part. Like we talked about the open source stuff, and this it talked about this like leveraging the agents and the coding tools. But like, what about Airbyte and Fivetran? Like, did they exist? Do you work with them? Are you competing with them? Like,
so we rarely compete with them is the answer. Like purely on the developer experience, right? Like if the developer is picking DLT, they use already code. So we're looking for a code solution, right? So maybe there are some in larger organizations, like they buy every tool in the box, but there's like, we're part of this bottom option motion where developers asking. So often like the organization may have bought Fivetran, but then suddenly the developer does, Brian, what you just did. Recently you just developed a DLT pipeline, and you even don't tell your bosses who have bought Fivetran and for the organization. And that's usually often how things start for us. And then the developers start pushing for more DLT in the company. Fivetran makes 90% of profits with around 25 sources. And one of our angel investors is Julian from Hugging Face. And if you look at Hugging Face, there's literally 100,000 of data sets. And our vision from the get-go was, this is how the world should look like. It should not be just like a world where only a few GUI connectors are supported. Can we make it a world where these data sets are free and everyone gets to interact with them in a way? Our vision is, if we succeed, we can make the market much bigger. So we're trying to make it in such a world that we make the pie much bigger for everyone in the world. So we don't feel we compete with these GUI connectors. Like we often recommend if it's a business team, they have a lot of money and they want some of the core connectors, we tell them, go to Fivetran, good company. If we talk to the technical decision maker, you have a bunch of Python people, you use an AI code editor, we are a natural choice. So, we're lucky that actually if you start talking to people about the choices, especially given what happened in the AI world in the last years, we have a very clear differentiation, which is now much clearer to the bosses. Like a year ago, we had a much harder time to explain this code solution to the management. But now, management understands and wants productivity gains from AI code editors. So this part of a story is much easier.
Yeah. I mean, that's excellent. I'm like super excited what you guys are working on. I'm super excited that you keep working on it because this is it's helping me solve my day-to-day problems. So if we're lacking of data science teams that are at Continue, so you're looking at them at this point. The data science infrastructure and leader of Continue, thanks to your product. Before we switch to reads, Elvis, you had a thought?
Yeah, I think another metaphor that I've been thinking of recently that I found helpful is the DLT team is in a way almost a platform team for the data community, right? Because like at big organizations, you have a platform team that enables like these developer pathways so you can go from like 0 to 1 super quickly. And I feel like it's super nice to have a team dedicated to thinking about data movement from first principles and then embedding like best practices into an SDK that an AI just has to like fill in the blanks for versus like the AI trying to come up with like, how do I like materialize this quickly? Or is this using Arrow? Like, and so for me, it's been really fun to see like folks who have no data experience just like get up and running and then like their eyes light up because like in a notebook, they've like built this like production pipeline.
Yeah, that's actually that framing of the platform team for the data community is actually perfect. Put that on the front of the box because like this is exactly what we're all struggling with as engineers who are like, you have less people to solve even bigger problems. So like you go from zero to tech debt from like seed funded or pre-seed funded, angel funded to now you have like a scaled company, but you have less people. More and more situations you're seeing like someone's picking up stuff that didn't have the skill set for like myself. Because like do you go higher for it or just like this roll up your sleeves and get excited about the problem? And for having the problem solved in a way that you're literally in my platform team to source this data from. Perfect framing. Appreciate you jumping in and adding that. Speaking of jumping in, we're going to jump out of this conversation and move into reads. So the question, folks, for everyone here, are you ready to read?
Reads.
Cool. So I'll go first, John, because I have one read, which is Gastown. So Steve Yeggs, or Yegi rather, I think he pronounced it like that. He's been on a tear of doing a bunch of podcasts, writing some blog posts. He, I think today works at the company AMP, which is the AI coding agent. Previously worked specifically on the Cody project, which was SourceGraph's AI IDE thing. He's been around for quite a bit, but he put out this blog post around gas towns. And I think Steve is like in a fever dream when it comes to AI coding. He's got like, previously he launched Beads, which is a very opinionated framework for AI coding that this takes the decision making, this knows what you want to do. And what gas towns does is basically like you've got different personas or these agent orchestrators or these overseers is the one thing that he was talking about that you just kind of know the overseer knows what to do. And I say this as a read. And yeah, if you guys have the show notes, you can open up and give it a skim. It's a long skim, to be quite honest. But I will say it's like, it feels like a fever dream reading it. Steve's got a lot of ideas and they're all in that one blog post. So like maybe get a large cup of coffee and pace yourself as you read it. But John, you had some pretty good feedback on this, and I'd be curious to get your take on this read.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of this kind of like orchestration work happening. And I've seen some takes where people are being like, well, the new engineering is orchestrating. And, you know, people who were really good at StarCraft back in high school are now very good at orchestrating agents around. But I think one of my main feedbacks on this was that it's just wildly expensive to do anything like this, especially with a frontier model. Because you're not only doing the inference for coding, but then all the inference for the orchestrating, and then all the inference for like the critiquing and the different personas, and just like this huge flywheel that just ends up being a lot of tokens spent. So I'm so curious how far down, you know, the billions of parameters you could go, how small you could go to get similar, maybe not like cutting edge results, but like how small you could go on that. I'm sure somebody's going to do something similar and call it, I don't know, Ant Town or something with tiny models or something. But yeah, I'm curious, Elvis, Matt, Thierry, if you've read this or seen anything about this, you know, these orchestrator engines that people are building or anything crazy, hot takes.
Yeah, I've been toying a lot with LLMs, and we're actually like building real things with LLM internally as an offering, but also for our own developer tooling. And I like always to start with like what an LLM is, right? It's a machine that receives text in and outputs text. And where is the brain? Where is the smarts coming from? Either it's the text that's it's been trained on, or it's the text that it's in the input. And we've all experienced it talking to ChatGPT or in a different tool where if you have a long conversation, like it will derail. It will start to have a mind of its own or get off topic. And I think that's where like the orchestration helps. All of these like personas or orchestrated agents, they have a very clear task. They don't get derailed as much. And I think it's something that will get better at understanding on like, when do I need to change the conversation? When do I need to recenter it and give it a clear instruction? And instead of having a chat window where you input every 2-3 messages, hey, get back to your task, you can have an automated system that does it and figures out when you need to like remind it what it's supposed to be doing.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people are sort of banking on, these various systems, be it Kanban or I don't know, linear or GitHub Actions even, or just the pull request in code to be that kind of like kickoff point and then the anchoring for these various agents. Because I think one of the things that's been quite disappointing from what maybe was promised with LLMs is that they're not actually really that autonomous as much as like people were saying that like, well, like it's going to go and like just start doing all this stuff. Like you still really have to tee it up to get going.
Yeah, I also think it definitely proposes a lot of user experience questions around like, how do we create user interfaces for developers to like actually intercept, agents at different steps of this continuous workflow. I think the thing I'm most excited about is like we've added a new definition to 10x engineer, right? Like historically, 10x engineers were like these like staff principal type people that shaped the architecture of business. But it's like we now have the second definition, which is like I literally have 10x output of a typical software engineer. That's something I'm very excited about as well.
Yeah, it's real in the sense of like I wouldn't consider myself a 10x engineer, but like I built an entire pipeline for my data stack, and I'm able to answer questions without really asking any questions internally of like, hey, how can I do this, or can I get your permission? So it's interesting. In the last couple of weeks, we've seen a lot of these tweets from really around Claude Code specifically, but folks basically saying like, this is what I do now because of Claude Code, or even Boris, who created Claude Code, is now saying 100% of the code for Claude Code is now generated by Claude Code. And this is, maybe it's scary, maybe it's not, but like we're in a world where now, and I know the Claude Code team is actually in the whole framework of it, like they're not that big when you think about the impact they're making in the industry. And that's a testament of like what we're actually doing with like, if you need to go scale and like auto scale a bunch of servers up based on like Claude Code uses in Japan, ends up going off the charts, like, let's go figure this out. Like that's the team that you're looking at on Twitter every day. Like those are the folks who are managing that. So perhaps they've hired more people since the last time I hung out with them. But basically what I'm getting at is like, we're definitely living in the world with 10x engineers, less of a meme and more of like a reality.
Yeah, I think some people in like large enterprises are saying more and more that writing code is becoming a luxury for them. Like if we look a few decades back, we were running computers by punching hole in a card, right? So maybe writing these magic words in a file is not something that we'll be doing a lot of in the next decades. But I think we're at an interesting point where we'll see if it's real, and we'll be part of this transition, and we can bring a lot of the knowledge and steering these machines and making them useful.
Yeah. Something that I guess listeners will know that I'm sort of notoriously skeptical on and off. I've had waves of being like all in AI pilled all the way to, just thinking it's dramatically overhyped. But like consistently, I've been using this stuff even since like the early open source days when we built a lot of like early RAG technologies. And it's funny we're talking about, these big Python data pipelines and stuff, because I had to hand roll that crap way back in the day for things. And the explosion of stuff that's happening in the space is very exciting. And I think that, there's going to be so much more software just out there. Like we can't put all of this back in Pandora's box. It's sort of just out there and people are using it. People are making more and more stuff. People are pouring gas on the town and it's lighting on fire.
Yeah. Matt, did you have something to add?
I think, like this is for me my fourth AI wave. I was building agents with wit.ai in 2016. So I know what a happy path is. And for me, I sometimes wonder whether I'm excited enough or whether I'm too skeptical because I'm just seeing like, but. And for me, orchestrators, I know like in the dltHub community, I think 60% of all people start with GitHub Actions. And, while, for example, there's like data engineering great tools, Prefect, Dexter, or if you're more AI inclined, Temporal, Modal out there. And the way how I think people pick some of these like traditional data engineering orchestrators are, honestly, people are making it up all along. I think it's just there's new kids in town. They're YOLOing it, and they don't even know what these are and how we should be choosing. And they just test things out. And then I get excited because I think, wow, it's kids out there. It's not about, I don't know, some scientific comparison which orchestrator tool is better than other or what needs to be doing. Just people, it's the Wild West out there, and the kids are just doing funky things, and we should just appreciate it and see who build something which is interesting and fun, and whenever we all get to use it. So I often, when people speculate like Steve did here, is I am like I'm in awe that you can write something, because like for me, I have too many but questions in my head to write a post like this ever, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. John, you got some reads you want to?
Yeah, I got a couple of reads that were quite impactful over the last week or two, I guess, for me. The first was this great read, 21 Lessons from 14 Years at Google. And I feel like it codified, really put into words a lot of the things that I have experienced or felt my time at startups, at AWS, at VMware. Yeah, this is a gold mine of advice. So listeners, go check it out. But two that really stuck out to me was the first one, the best engineers are obsessed with solving user problems. I think that still stands today in the age of AI and coding agents and all this stuff. Like there's a lot of fun, sexy, interesting technologies, a lot of things to go build. But being obsessed about user problems, I think, is still a great differentiator of great products, of great platforms. dltHub, you're solving like real user problems that then is impactful for the business, impactful for all kinds of things. And then the other one was number 8, which is at scale, even your bugs have users. And oh boy, have I felt that before. So you wouldn't think versioning software would be as hard as it is, but once AI can solve that problem for me, I'll be very happy.
Yeah, I'm skimming the article and just looking at the titles. I'm smiling. Some of them are hard-earned lessons in my case. And the number 8, as you mentioned, I also maintain a library called Hamilton. And once we shipped a notebook-related feature, and it was very experimental. I had the open PR, and someone merged the PR while it was still like in a draft state.
Oh no!
And I wanted to change something, and I heard that we couldn't because enterprise users started using it as part of their test suite or something. And it's like, oh well, this is with us forever until version 2.0. Let's.
Yeah, it's a classic enterprise story, honestly. Like, no, we rely on this bug that you shipped, 3 months ago. You can't change it now. Oh, goodness. Okay, I'll move on to the next read because we're running a little bit short on time. But this was something from PC Gamer. And I've mentioned this a few times on the podcast, but the short of the post is basically Linux is good now. And I could not be happier. This made it onto Hacker News. And Linux gaming has really sort of taken off in the last, year or two, to the point where really it's gotten good enough where you can basically daily drive it for most games. For the longest time for software developers, you could obviously daily drive it. For productivity stuff, with a lot of stuff moving to the web, you could daily drive it. Gaming was really like the last thing, I think. So I'm calling it, maybe I called it before on the podcast, 2026, the year of the Linux desktop, Brian. What do you think?
Yeah, it's on my list of things to do. I've got a second PC that I've ran Linux on multiple times, but I got in the Windows 11 bug. So, well, I wanted to try it out. So it's running Windows 11 now, but I might circle back, especially if I could play, some AAA titles. That'd be great.
Yeah. We should really try to find some people at Valve who, they're pouring a lot of resources into the open source ecosystem to enable this to happen. There's a lot of these compatibility layer things with Proton and the ARM translation layers and some really interesting deep technologies. But yeah, DLT team, do you game? Do you game on Linux? What do you think about this?
Yes, I have my Linux desktop since last year, Linux on my laptop, and I get to play Balatro or Slay the Spire whenever I fly to San Francisco. So it's been good.
I used to game on Stadia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was so excited about Stadia, and I tried to get every one of my friends on it because to me it was just so innovative as a technology, being able to like stream these games. So it's very unfortunate that, they shut it down. But I do think that, like it's an exciting future for especially like folks with like low compute resources to be able to like game and things. That's the last time I gamed though, was when Stadia died.
Oh, bummer.
John, I have 2 kids, so my playing in this Christmas season was Lego and Uno.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, keep it analog. Perfect. Well, hey, guys, thanks so much for coming on, having the conversation, educate us about DLT, dltHub. It sounds like our audience, like this is in your wheelhouse. So try it out. You can reach out to the team. You'll have a Discord. Pretty accessible. So check it out and stay ready. That's all the time we have for today. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us at x.com/open-source-ready. Open Source Ready is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor of developer-first startups. For more information, visit heavybit.com.